For more than a decade, Saturdays and Illegal Curve have been synonymous with one another. With insight, analysis, and interviews regarding the Winnipeg Jets, the Manitoba Moose, and all around the NHL, here are Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg, and your host, Drew Mandel. The Illegal Curve Hockey Show starts now.
Good morning, Winnipeg. Good morning, Manitoba. And for all of those joining us live on the internet or wherever you are, good morning to you and welcome to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. But despite the intro you just heard from Mandy, there's no Drew Mandel. There's no Ezra Ginsburg. There is Dave Minuk, who's back from a few days of holidays. And I'm joined by the one, the only Jim Toth of 680 CJOB. Jim, how you doing this morning?
Good morning. How are you, sir? Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure, as always. I'm doing all right.
Yeah, it's how are the holidays? Merry Christmas to you.
Yeah, thanks. And happy Hanukkah as well. Interestingly, we ran into each other in the airport. Yeah. One of us was going to Hawaii, and one of us was going to the Hawaii of Alberta in Lethbridge. So that line killed in line, didn't it, when I said that? So
It did. A couple chuckles.
Yeah, no, it was a great holiday. I got back to see my parents who are both in their 80s, and we got the kids there, and it'd been about a decade since they'd had a Christmas with really young kids in the house and stuff. So it was a really good holiday, and good to be back, and looking forward to these back-to-back games against the Wild.
Yeah, there's the rivalry series, the lot of talk about the Jets and the Wild, and going back to that playoff series back in, was it 2017, 2018, and
yeah,
that great first round series that those two teams had. And it's funny because everybody for years has talked about the geographic rivalry between these two clubs, Jim, and yet now the focus is, now they've had a playoff series. There's that kind of that antipathy that they've created because of it. And Rick Bowness has talked about it in the last few days, just that idea that you need to have that sort of spice created. You can't just kind of, okay, well, you're close in proximity, therefore you dislike each other.
Yeah, and that's interesting, right? Because I've been to a Wild game a couple of years ago when the Jets were there, and the Wild fans were into it. Like, they were against the Jets for sure. They wanted the rivalry to be there as well. They really did. And they were giving us the gifts, but also, like, at the end of the night, I think the Wild got a win, and they were like, we hope this grows, and we hope this becomes a big rivalry. And I think a lot of Jets fans, that was their first road trip, was down to Minnesota, because so many fans, sports fans here in Manitoba, like to go down there and catch the Vikings or a Twins game, or even the Wild when they weren't around, when the Jets weren't around. So I thought it would become a bit bigger than it is. But having said that, Dave, like, I think it is a rivalry. I think these two teams don't like each other. I think that no matter what the lineups are, and we saw that last year, right? Like, we saw how vicious some of these games can be, and we know that. I think they hit on Nick Ehlers last year just prior to the playoffs, amp things up between these two teams too. But they don't like each other, and sometimes that comes from, I think Nashville and the Jets don't like each other because of the playoff series. Yeah. That wasn't a very good playoff series. I thought the Jets handled the Minnesota Wild pretty good. I know there was some controversy with the Josh Morrissey high stick on Eric Staal, and that sort of led to it a little bit as well. But I think the most heated rivalry, I should say, from those days is Nashville still, because of that playoff series and PK Subban and Mark Scheifele. But I still think there's a rivalry here, and I still think these two teams don't like each other. And I think that, like, when I think of USA hockey, I think of the Minnesota area. I think of, the Wisconsin area. I think of Boston College, and I think of Michigan area as well, as there's so many players in the Jets like that. But it's a hotbed for hockey. They love it. And I think it is a rivalry. And I actually, when I looked at the schedule this year, I thought, that's a great way in between Christmas and New Year's. It's funny being home in Southern Alberta. There's these huge basketball tournaments that take part. And I played high school basketball, and I was laughing that the town of Raymond, I think it's 5,000 people, was hosting the Sugar Bowl again. And it came down to McGrath, a team of like, or a town of like 8,000 people, against Harry Ainley High School out of Edmonton was the final or the semifinal. And McGrath beat them. Like, there's it's like Hoosiers in Southern Alberta. It really is, with these small towns and the way they take their basketball. And I think that's how Manitoba and Minnesota approach their hockey, right? Like, these small towns, and they produce these players, and they all want to play for the Gophers or Minnesota State or Wisconsin or things like that. So I think it is a rivalry. I think this is going to be amped up. When I looked at the schedule, my point of this is the basketball references between Christmas and New Year's. I think that's great. Like, I know there's the Chicago game in there, but maybe you go to Calgary and maybe either going to go out west right away. I think that's awesome that in between Christmas and New Year's you can do back-to-back games. And how many people have families in the state of North Dakota or Minnesota. And then I think that you could travel and see both if you wanted to, if you're off in between Christmas and New Year. So I thought, when I saw the schedule, I thought this was a great idea to do it back-to-back mid-afternoons. That's awesome.
Yeah, the home and home element is definitely going to be a lot of fun. And you're right, people can make that trip down to Minnesota, especially, the roads are pretty clear. So it's not a long drive. I think 6.5 hours, usually maybe 7 if you stop. Maybe you want to stop at Happy Harry's on the way home, but a little bit longer for some. But it's just it's a good set, and we'll get into this the Minnesota series and that game upcoming tonight. That starts tonight. Sorry, that game starts at 1:00 here in Winnipeg, and then 1:00 in St. Paul tomorrow. But we'll of course break that down on the Illegal Curve post game show. You can join us around 3:45, 4:00, which, Jim, is going to impact my ability to watch a Moose game tomorrow. The New Year's Eve game, when I've got to do the post game show, try and figure out if I'm doing it from the Maison or if I'm going to be doing it from Canada Life. I'll be doing it from one of the two locations, but there's indoor fireworks tomorrow at the Moose game, so I don't want to miss that.
Whoa.
I know, I'm Archangel, so that should be a lot of fun. I've seen them before, of course, as have many Manitobans, so it'll be interesting to see what those guys can do. I've never seen indoor fireworks, I don't think, but I'm excited to see that tomorrow at Canada Life when the Moose take on the Stars in a rematch. Speaking of the Moose, we'll have Wyatt Bongiovanni. He's on a Jets deal. He signed 2-year contract with the Jets out of Quinnipiac College. So he started off a little slow. He, of course, came to training camp with, I think he had a groin injury, so he was off to a bit of a slow start, but he's been heating up of late. And then we'll be joined by the man, the myth, the legend of Winnipeg, Andrew Hustler Patterson. He's joining us at 10:30 to talk Jets and probably some Moose as well. So it's a full show. But, Jim, we'll just quickly reflect on that Chicago and Jets series game story on Wednesday night. The Jets win-o-meter, I think, was around 95%. And if not for the lack of special teams, which will boost us into our first topic of the morning, and on some unfortunate posts, they definitely win that game, almost 10 times out of 10 every single time.
Yeah, I didn't see a lot of the game itself, but I did watch the highlights and read the post-game reports. It was one of those games I think you're disappointed because you didn't get 2 points off Chicago. But it's also one of those games that, from what I saw and what I read about the breakdown of it, was the fact that it wasn't like they weren't trying. It wasn't like they weren't playing well. The 6 posts, I had somebody say to me the other day, man, that Mrazek goaled them again, eh? And I said, well, he did, but so did his goal posts. Like, it just takes 1 or 2 of those, right? So I think they're happy with the fashion in which they played. They started out great, especially coming off the holiday break and having to travel. Although in my experience and from what I've been told from a lot of coaches is that stay-at-home game is the one right after the holidays that really hurts because you're home with family and everything's distracting and stuff. So good to get on the plane. But the effort was there, and they still played well. It's disappointing they lost to Chicago. But the big thing for me with the Jets this year, Dave, is the fact that they play so well game in, game out. It's the consistency. And even when they lost those 3 games in a row, there was some consistency in their game, and especially their 5-on-5 play. It is a game, I think special teams cost them again. I really do. And I know that I've been watching this, like the San Jose game really stood out to me when they lost 2-1 there, that you can't not, you can lose to San Jose. You can lose to any team in the National Hockey League. You can't go 0-for-5 on the power play against San Jose. That's just, you can't do that against a team like that. So, and then it was a couple weeks later, about a week ago now, from that San Jose game, that Rick Bowness said that special teams cost him the game. And it was a home game. And he came out and said that. And I was kind of glad he said 5 or 6 games this year. And I totally agree with him. I think that they are leaving points on the table when it comes to their power play. Now, I know we're going to talk specialty teams, and I have a bigger issue with the PK, but I thought that another thing with the Chicago game, you need to get that thing going. You're at the midway point here. You're going into January. And your power play, just plain and simple, has to be better. I don't think it needs new personnel. It needs to move better. It needs to move faster. So, but wrapping up the Chicago game, and I mean, Connor Bedard, it was funny recapping everybody's thoughts on the game, and everybody said he's going to be a problem. Yeah, he already is a problem. He's scored against them twice now, 3 times in 2 games, and they're coming to town here on the 11th. He's a problem. He's an 18-year-old problem for the rest of the National Hockey League, but it's a great problem to have. He is an absolute phenom. I'll go back to the game they played here in December, and he scored the lone goal for Chicago, I believe. There was 2 in that one, but his play to set up that goal was him circling around the vision to read where a pass was going in the Jets' end, and he picked off the pass, made a pass, but then he just didn't stop. He went through the slot, went to the wide side, and put it in. He's got the speed, the skill, the vision, all of that. That hockey sense of that play, to not only make a play to get the puck back in the Jets' end, and then make a play, but also follow up on the play. And I was honestly surprised his teammate knew where he was going to set up that goal against Winnipeg here in Winnipeg. So I think that he's going to be a great problem to have, but he's going to be a problem for the Central Division and the rest of the National Hockey League. It's going to be very interesting after this year, the direction Chicago goes, but that's my thoughts on the game overall. And I don't know how you feel, Dave. I know Jets fans don't want to hear that's a loss, but when you see a kid like that play like that and have a shot like that, his wrist shot is just, it's top. We used to talk about Patrick Laine's slap shot.
Yeah.
We just started talking about Connor Bedard as a rookie's wrist shot. It's unbelievably good.
Yeah, his release is phenomenal, and I saw someone joking about the flex that he uses, but I don't know if it matters if he was using one of those old school, an Easton, for God's sakes. Like, that kid is, you're right, Jim. He's got an unbelievable shot, and yeah, I mean, look, I agree with you. Like, the whole idea for the Jets is that you win or lose, you want to see them play a consistent brand of hockey. Yeah. And that's the most important thing, right? When you come out of that, and it's funny because Mark Scheifele talked about it before they went into the holiday break. He goes, I wish we weren't having a holiday break right now, just because they're playing, so they were playing so well. Obviously, the LA game, the Colorado game, the Boston game, the Jets, that they're feeling it. And routinely, and last year, it wasn't as bad this year. I took note of it because I was curious. Last year, I think, what was it, like 13 of the 14 teams, I think, that were on the road ended up losing. Because it's such an unusual, and again, I'm not here to blame, the NHL because the Jets lost the game, period. But it was just such an unusual rule, right? That you, generally speaking, have to leave the day before to be in the city so you don't have any travel issues. But for whatever reason, because of the CBA, teams cannot travel together the night before the 27th. And so, of course, the Jets were having to leave at like 7 a.m. And then it's just an unusual quirk in that schedule.
Yeah.
This year wasn't so bad. I looked, the home teams didn't fare as well as they did the year prior, but I was just curious to see if that, how much of a factor that, played into it potentially. But look, ultimately what it is, and I think the overarching conversation right now, because it's not goaltending, because that's been phenomenal. It's not 5-on-5 play, because that's been phenomenal. They've been upper echelon teams in both those categories. Connor Hellebuyck, big surprise. He's regained his spot atop the mountain as, the goals saved above expected leader in the NHL. And it's funny because everybody was freaking out about Connor Hellebuyck. Well, they freak out no more, because his play, of course, has been stellar. And then you've got the 5-on-5 play, and we've talked about it. The Jets are one of the best 5-on-5 teams. Defensively, they've been better. It's really just the special teams, right? You've got the 24th ranked power play. You've got 23rd ranked power play and the 26th ranked penalty kill. So I guess my question to start, Jim, is of the two, and I think you've already kind of touched on it as to what your answer is going to be, but if you had to give an answer, what is your more concerning of those two issues?
Well, it is a penalty kill for me. And this is something that sits, as you mentioned, 26 overall in the National Hockey League at 75.5%. And the reason it's the penalty kill for me more so than the power play, Dave, is because it was 7th last year in the National Hockey League. Scott Ardeo came in as an associate coach and really did a number with that. They picked up Janssen Fjallby off waivers from Washington, whom he was familiar with, and the penalty kill. For the first time, I'll have to look back to the Claude Noel days, but Paul Maurice had always struggled with the penalty kill and getting a good one here in Winnipeg. It was a top 10 penalty kill, and for a time, I think top 5 in the National Hockey League. That's the improvement, right? That's a massive drop. That's too big of a drop for this team. And it's the same players. It's the same system. It's the same coaches. And it's the same goalie. The other thing about the penalty kill that's alarming to me, Dave, is, and I mentioned this on Jets at Noon, and we've been talking a lot about Mark Scheifele this year, and everybody has, and why the commitment to defensive play, just overall 200-foot game. And to me, it looks like a weight's lifted off. And I've done a lot of talk over the years with agents and stuff to talk about how, that's the big contract. It's over now. It's like you're always, even at 30, you're working for that. And Mark has always been a player in my mind when I've talked to him, and I haven't for a couple of seasons, but back in the early days, he always thought in order to help the team, he needed to score more. That was just his mentality. And defense he cared about, but if I score 3 points a game and we lose, I got to score 5 points. Like, that's just his mentality. Now I think he's got the deal. He knows where he's going to be. They want him here. He wants to be here. It's solidified, and he's just playing free and easy. Well, my point to this is on the penalty kill is I'm surprised he's struggling so much because I think Connor Hellebuyck has found an extra gear. And I didn't know Connor Hellebuyck could have an extra gear. He's got 3 Vezina nods on his resume, and he's got a win. I think he's playing his best hockey of his entire career. And I wonder if that's the same with Connor Hellebuyck as Mark Scheifele. Like, even though you're making $6 million a year and you've made about 48 in your career, that's the big deal you're playing for. Now that that's there, he has elevated his game this year. And I know what you mentioned, it's kind of funny, right? That first week of the season, week and a half, 4 goals against in 4 straight games. What's wrong with Connor Hellebuyck? And but I think he's found another gear, and that's why the penalty kill dropping is because everybody knows in your penalty kill, your most important player is your goaltender. And he's not been an issue whatsoever. He has been phenomenal this year. He's found that extra gear, as I said, like Scheifele has. So for the penalty kill to struggle like this, that to me is the one you need to shore up because, they are on I think it's got to be 23 games now where they've allowed 3 goals or less. Mm-hmm. That is phenomenal. Yeah. So where are those goals coming from? Those goals are coming from man advantage. They have to be, right, if he's playing so well. Now, I don't have the breakdown, and I want to say that as a fact to look it all up. But if you're a goaltender and your team is allowing 3 goals or less for over 20 games in a row, right, where a team's doing their damage, and it has to be on the penalty kill. Now, that's why it's not hurting them because their 5-on-5 play is so great. But this will catch up to you. And we all know what playoff hockey is. In playoff hockey, the difference is quite often a power play goal. And that's quite often a 2-1 game or something. So that's the one that concerns me the most. I think what frustrates me the most, though, is the power play. Mm-hmm. That's frustrating because this is a talented team. Yeah. This isn't like this is loaded for bear. I know some people go Iafallo, or some people go Lowry. I don't care. If you've got Perfetti and Scheifele and Kyle Connor and Josh Morrissey, your power play should not be as bad as it is. It should be top 15, top 12. So that's interesting to me. That's the most frustrating one of the two, but the one I think that really hurts the team and bothers me the most is the one I think they need to fix the most is the penalty kill.
Well, and Jim, it's interesting because, when you look at the power play, and one of the things that when Rick Bowness was asked about the penalty kill, he said losing guys like Saku Maenalainen and Kevin Stenlund has hurt because they were effective on that PK. So he did go to those 2 guys. But this team has guys like David Gustafson, who is an excellent PKer, both with the Moose, and he's done a good job with the Jets. And I think, while it's true that those guys are definitely a loss, and Stenlund, I think he's got 5 or 6 goals in Florida, so he's having a good season. But Saku Maenalainen was where offense went to die. I mean, he didn't produce offensively, so he was good on the PK, but he didn't do anything else. And oftentimes we hear in the NHL, you can't just be a one-trick pony. You can't just do one thing. You have to do multiple things in order for a coach to be able to use you. And to me, Saku Maenalainen was one of those guys who excellent on the PK, but he didn't do anything offensively. So that was definitely a loss. And so the personnel aren't identical to what it was last year, but that was what Rick Bowness kind of isolated. He said, those 2 guys do hurt on the PK, especially with Stenlund because he took those draws and he was good in that and effective in that manner. But, shifting to the power play, I think one of the things you talked about and it struck me was the lack of movement. And, our friend Murat Atesh of The Athletic wrote a very interesting article recently, just breaking down, where the power play has struggled. And he talked about, 3 major issues. The importance of face-offs on the power play, even though people, poo-poo face-off talk. But if you lose the face-off, you're losing 15 to 20 seconds of the power play. But then he talked about the importance of gaining the zone. Interestingly, the Jets are amongst the worst in the league at gaining the zone on the power play from his article. And you can read it. We've got it linked in the morning papers. And then the other thing that he said, which you just touched on, was he said players being married to their positions and not moving. And he said one of the testaments of a good power play, and he talked about New Jersey, was the idea that when guys got the puck, everybody shifted. It wasn't like guys just stood stationary and remained in their spots. And that's it. And if you watch the Jets power play, they do seem married to these positions and not really willing to move more than 1 or 2 feet, from where they're currently situated. And because of that, it's predictable. And getting those shots through, obviously it's important. But to me, that the one you hit on was key, is movement, because that to me is an area of this Jets team. Like you said, you've got Nikolai Ehlers, Kyle Connor when he's healthy, Mark Scheifele, Cole Perfetti, cerebral, smart, efficient, fast, crafty. You go on and on with all the adjectives in the thesaurus that's beside me here, Jim. But the reality is that these guys are, you're right, they're too talented in order to be such a poor power play team. And you're right, the San Jose game. I mean, Rick Bowness said special teams. He didn't, like we talked about, it's not the penalty kill. Really, penalty kill is important because you're right, especially in the playoffs, you want that to be efficient. But the power play, has definitely cost them games. I mean, the San Jose game, you're right. You can't go 0 for 5 and expect to win a game. Chicago game, same thing. There's opportunities, and obviously they hit the post a ton of times. But the fact of the matter is that, a league average power play probably gets you 1 or 2 more goals or 1 goal at least. And you're winning. If Rick Bowness feels 5 or 6 games have been cost because of that, you're probably winning maybe, let's say, 2 of them, 3 of them. And where are you in the standings relative to that? So, that idea of movement though, and what are you seeing in the power play in terms of the lack of movement?
Yeah, and those are great names you brought up from last year, Stenlund and Menelainen. And I misspoke about that when I said the same personnel. But so I like what you mentioned there too, Dave, on the penalty kill, is the fact that Gustafsson is Menelainen, but with some offense. Right. The personnel isn't, the change of the personnel from those two isn't enough for me to say that this penalty kill would struggle. Yeah. I think they actually got better all-around hockey players on it. So I think that would be a little bit advantageous to them too. The movement is interesting. Yeah, I agree with face-offs, and I don't want to get into the face-off debate because to me it's like timely saves, and people argue it all the time. And I'm sorry, a save in the third period when it's 7-1 isn't the same as a save when it's 2-2 with 3 minutes to go on a breakaway. It just isn't. That's a more timely save to me, and I can't put analytics or anecdotes on it other than it's a game of momentum, and that's what shifts it. So, and that's the point about face-offs. You can look at all the stats you want, but look at the games this year look at the Oilers game here. They could not win a face-off the last 4 minutes of that game, and it cost them the game. You win 1 or 2 of those face-offs and get possession of the puck, the outcome is likely different. Yeah. Now, you want to quantify what happens off a face-off and how many times you're scored on? Fine, fair enough. But then I'll take the small percentages left of not winning that face-off and go, this is what happened against Edmonton. They could not win a face-off. So, and I do believe it's important. I don't want to get into that whole debate. I'll just say that hockey's a game of possession, and you want the puck. And if you're not winning face-offs and having the puck, quantify it how you want. It's not a good thing. The other thing about the movement is you're exactly right. This is a team that went out of its way after Patrick Laine's first season to get him the puck in that spot. Right. And people will say, well, Ovechkin or Stamkos, and I'll say, watch those guys. They move around. It's the same shot from that general area, but they move. It's not the standing still, one-timer. They'll go down, they'll come up, they'll sometimes – I've seen Ovechkin do it almost close to the goal line and wire that one-timer because he's just going to where the lane is. It just makes sense. Mm-hmm. I remember the days when the power play was clicking, and then all of a sudden defensemen started sliding – or laying down on the ice in front of Blake Wheeler behind the net. Remember that? Yeah, and then Blake would try to pass it into the guy for a couple of games, and then he started to pass it back to the point, and then there's still not a shot. So good, you have to find alternatives for what you see. But to me, it's movement, and that's a great point by Murat, is that if you're standing there and expect it to be there, it's not going to work. You need to get those 4 guys moving that are penalty killing. You need to get in open other lanes. And I think that's what they're lacking of is they know what works and they sit there. But to me, it's not just the movement; it's the quickness of it. You got to know where the puck's going. And for a team that on the power play, like Murat pointed out, likes its positions, then the puck should get there quicker. It just should. And so the idea of I've never liked a power play that you hold. And then you pass, and then you hold, and then you pass. I understand if the pass isn't there, but then there's another one. And that's the kind of vision I think. The puck needs to move quicker in my mind, and they need to move around. They need to get up and down and shift around. And quite often, like, you give it to the wing and it's Scheifele. Can Scheifele skate to the point and send Morrissey down, and then all of a sudden the penalty kills, looking where this guy's going, and Scheifele's going to play it to somebody else or hammer the shot. It just, that's what I see. Now, I'm not an NHL coach. I'll never claim to be, but I just think the positioning of it, they need to be a little bit more creative, and as opposed to doing what they want to do, take what's being given to you and create something more out of it. A new lane, a different lane, a night size. Now, when it clicks, like, hitting posts and stuff like Chicago, it looks real good. There's been some games where they've been 1 for 5 or 0 for 5 that I didn't have a problem with the power play. It moved quick, it looked well, they got goalied, and then they hit some posts. But, that's what I see. That's why I just think it needs to be quicker, and that's what film is all about in my mind. You think you're doing something, and then you see that you're not. And I've seen that more often than not. I've done that myself, where I think I'm doing what a coach says, not in hockey, but and then I watch a film, and I'm just like, oh man, I'm not even anywhere near where I'm supposed to be, but I thought I was, right? And that's what I think the film work needs to be. But we're into the season far enough now that I think there's enough film for them to sort of rectify that. But that's just what I see. I agree with heavily with 2 of Murat's points for sure. All 3 of them are good ones. But the winning some faceoffs and getting possession and the movement and making not only themselves but the puck move quicker is what I think it needs.
There you go. Well, the power play talk is done for now. We're going to shift to Moose talk. Wyatt Bongiovanni is going to join us, Moose forward on a Jets contract. He is
great name, by the way.
Bongiovanni. They call him Bonjo. He's going to be
I hope it's Bon Jovi. He's too young.
You can ask him. Maybe
I will.
He's a Michigan guy. We'll find out. We'll talk to him coming up after these words from our sponsors. Welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show, although some of you may have thought it was the postgame show, Jim, because I left the postgame show banner up. I'm not at top of my game. I'm slightly, maybe I'm feeling that jet lag, but yeah, I had Ezzy texting me from Mexico going, you got the postgame show banner up. I'm like, I didn't realize until I saw Doug's comment, and I was like, why do we have the Betway banner there? That's not supposed to be there on a Saturday show. That will be there in a few hours, of course, when the Jets and Wild do battle. And then folks hopefully will be joining myself, and we'll see who's going to be joining me, Jim. Not you. You're soldiering through some illness right now to be here with us. So we've used up our goodwill with you, but we will be having someone else join me on the postgame show with the boys out of town. We're going to be joined momentarily by Wyatt Bongiovanni. I've been reliably informed. So, Jim, we'll talk about the Moose a little bit. You covered the first iteration of the Moose, of course, and now the second one is here. And this is a young team, and it's funny because I've had comments about folks saying, well, these young kids are going to miss opportunities if they don't make the playoffs. I said, and I haven't responded yet, but in my head I was like, true, but they're playing all these games, so they're going to have a full regular season of action versus the Jets, the Moose, if they were playing veterans, and if they had more veterans in the lineup. All those young guys aren't playing these critical games in a pro season, so in a pro schedule. So that to me is the counter to the concern. Of course, you want them to play in the playoffs, and we'll talk about that. We've got Wyatt Bongiovanni joining us, the Michigan man. He's ready to join us from, it looks like, Hockey for All Center. They're getting underway at 11 o'clock for practice. Hey, Wyatt, how's it going?
Hi, I'm doing well. How are you guys?
Good, Wyatt. Good. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely.
How are things doing? You guys, of course, played last night. Not the result you would have wanted, but how's the season going for you overall and for the team specifically?
For the team this year, it's been a interesting year. I think that it's come to our attention as players that our first game of the weekend, if we're doing back-to-backs or if we have a weekend like this one versus Texas where it's Friday, Sunday. We got to do a better job trying to win these first games. But then we have usually a turnaround game the second one. So, finding a way to bring that energy that we bring to the second game and bring it to the first, so that we can, string along 2 in a row or 3 in a row, that would be huge for us.
I want to continue on with this talk about the season, but I want to know how you became a Manitoba Moose and who approached you and how it all worked out for you. I know you played 3 games and now you're in your second full season with the team. I always love hearing how Craig Heisinger and the crew has found somebody out of college. There's quite the resume here with Moose Hockey on finding great players out of college. How did you become a Moose?
Oh, I appreciate you saying that. So Quinnipiac, my senior year, we got eliminated from the tournament by Michigan. So following that was, that was my main focus, was leading that team to a national championship. And unfortunately, we weren't able to do that. But nonetheless, had a great year there, great 4 years there. And that season, I played well enough to get the attention of some teams, and Winnipeg was one of those teams. Talked to Larry Simmons, talked to Craig Heisinger, all these great guys that were recruiting me, and it was my goal at the start of college to leave with an NHL contract, and I was lucky enough to make that happen.
When you signed that NHL deal and you agree to come to Winnipeg. And obviously we've been talking to you for the last couple of seasons, but what did you know about Winnipeg prior to coming here?
Not a whole lot. I hit the Google machine pretty quickly to learn about it. But no, I knew it was I knew what everyone knew. You see it in NHL playoffs. I knew that they had a passionate fan base. I knew that maybe a little more of a blue collar city, and cold. That's what everyone says. But I got to be honest with you, cold, it is what it is. You move on. It's not that big of a deal.
It's the Michigan of the North, isn't it? Beautiful Winnipeg.
Yeah.
How do you feel this season's gone for you now that you've got some experience in the league and a ton of AHL games in your second full season? 15 points, 8 goals. How have you been playing? Are you happy with your game?
Yeah, I think compared to last year, absolutely. And this year, each game, I think I'm growing and trying to learn more things. It doesn't mean I have an off game. I'm trying to find that level of consistency where every night I can be an impact player, and I think I can be, and I think I've proved it in games. So again, just finding that level of consistency and making sure that it's hard. We got 70 whatever games plus playoffs. Being able to come every game, every shift, win your shift. That's definitely a goal of mine, and I feel like I'm making the steps in the right direction towards that.
One of the biggest things I noticed about you is your shot. It's very effective. It seems, it's funny. I remember we talked about it earlier in the season. You said, I just got to use my shot and have faith in that. And then you went on quite a heater scoring for the Moose of late. So is that something you spend a lot of time working on and that you've developed and kind of honed into one of the skills that you possess at the pro level?
Absolutely. Off-season shooting, in-season, after practice, before practice, whatever it is. Obviously I'm working on other things, but I've loved shooting the puck and I love scoring goals. So I think that naturally I want to practice that more. And, off-season consists a lot of – I have a really good setup where I train in Michigan where, we have the gym, we have the rink, and then we have off-ice shooting areas. So – I'm allowed however much time I want to spend in there. And, I have a lot of room to work on things. So definitely a lot of hours spent in there. And, it's the 10,000 hour rule thing for me. Really. It's like, you can never shoot enough, but, even myself, I'll find new ways to shoot the puck or new ways to receive it off a pass. And, the game has got, there's no two plays that are exactly the same. It's just, constant being able to adapt, being able to move your body so that you can face the net in certain situations. So there's a lot of skills behind it, but to answer your question, yes, I work on it quite a bit, and I take pride in that.
One of the great things about the American Hockey League is what you said. Like, there's the back-to-back games. You play a team twice. I think that creates rivalries. I think that's great for fans. The second game is always animated. You did that a lot in college. It's just a ton more games. Was that one of the biggest adjustments? Was not necessarily the schedule, but the number of games?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, college we played, I think the max we played was like 41 or 42. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it's a longer season in the AHL, and occasionally we'll have that college schedule where it's back to back. We'll have a week off where we practice back to back and then a week off. But once you really start getting into the flow of things, you get those weekday games to break it up, and then you're traveling and then whatnot. So that was definitely a big adjustment, but I like playing games, and I think a lot of players, if you ask them, they would prefer to play games over practice. So it's, it is what it is, but I like our schedule.
I got to ask you about your line mates. You're lined up with Danny Zhilkin and Nikita Chibrikov. That's a dangerous trio. So what have you been able to create in terms of chemistry, and what have you seen from those two players?
Yeah, they're both fantastic players. Obviously, Chibrikov, very skilled, very poised. He's also a pretty feisty guy for his size. And, I give him a lot of credit because there are some towering guys in this league. Danny, he's been good at center. He's been, he likes to show his speed, and I think he's really skilled. So, two obviously really good players. And I think we're trying to build on chemistry every game, every practice. For a little, there was a language barrier there, but I think that they trust me enough as a player and as a person to know that I just want the best for them, and that'll help lift us as a whole line. So we've been working on that, and no doubt that it'll improve as well.
Jim, I just want to ask, how's your Russian? Have you started to pick up any? Because I know that occasionally, especially with Dmitry Kuzmin on the back end, you might need to be able to pick up a little Russian there so those guys can communicate with you.
Yeah, I got to get out the Duolingo. I try listening on them, and I just ask them what. But no, I got to pick up on some of that stuff.
That's what my question was actually going to be, Dave. So are you learning more Russian, or they're learning more English? I would presume the English, right?
Yeah, I would think so.
The other thing I wanted to ask you about specifically is just what you mentioned about, working with those guys and what great players there are. There's a ton of high-end prospects here as yourself with this team. Are you that sort of point as a veteran now? Because the American Hockey League is a little different than the NHL. It's usually 3 or 4 or 5 years you're a veteran. In the AHL, it's, you're in your second year and you've been here for almost 3, that you're that guy. Do you take on that role, and do you find that you're kind of the veteran now that goes, this is what I thought when I first got to Winnipeg. This is what I know about it. This is the kind of hockey we want to play. This is what the coaches want from us. Or you take on that leadership role now, Wyatt?
Subtly. I think that there are guys in our locker room right now who are, take on a more serious leadership role. With that being said, I definitely think that I can be a leader in my own right, a guy that young guys can come to and talk to if they need be. And, I was a captain in college. We got a bunch of ex-captain in colleges and juniors on our team. Like, we're a team full of leaders. And it's really interesting to see because, everyone had that responsibility at a certain level, at a high level. So, you have a bunch of good guys in the locker room. You got a lot of accountable guys who will, do anything for their brother next to them. So, I personally, I love taking on a leadership role. It's a challenge and it's fun. So To answer your question, I haven't, like, I'm not in our leadership meetings per se, but does not mean that I can't bring leadership qualities to the team or to the locker room.
Yeah, I see that. Like I see that going forward, right? You're kind of that person now, but if you're here for another 2 years, hopefully, then that would become you. So that's important that you noted that there's a lot of guys here, but that still that's what it takes to be a good team is whether you're in those leadership meetings or not, that you sort of all have to toe the same line.
Yes.
We're joined by Wyatt Bongiovanni, Moose forward on a Jets contract. He joins us this morning prior to their practice at Hockey for All Center, which gets underway at around 11 o'clock. So we appreciate Wyatt joining us. Wyatt, got to ask you, how much did you enjoy watching that holiday video? Because, I mean, I think I've seen it about 20 times now, but each time it makes me chuckle. It's a pretty funny thing. So I thought the Moose folks did a good job with it. How much I saw they showed the reaction of all you guys watching it, but just speaking to you now, what did you think of that entertaining video that you guys put out?
Yeah, it was really good. They put together a great video, great script. I don't know who the writer was, but I don't know if there was improv going on, but obviously I wasn't a part of the video. I would like to have been. Maybe I get a smaller role. I could be the Christmas tree next time. Jeez, throw me a bone. But no, they did a great job. Malott had a lot of lines and he crushed it. There was a lot of good performances there. And it's always nice to bring, it can be stressful, hockey, and you can get caught up into the flow of the season. And that's always a nice kind of, reminder. You can bring some fun to it as well.
Who surprised you in that video? Because I've had a couple people at work go, like, are they all players? Because some of these guys are acting really well, and thought they were actors. I'm like, no, these are all players. Like, did anybody's performance surprise you?
Surprise me. That's I would say Tyrell Bauer, but that didn't surprise me. He was kind of just playing his personnel, and then maybe Chris Reichel. CJ, I thought CJ did a good job acting when he broke the fourth wall. It's funny, everyone did a good job. The rookies getting to bed, it was good. It was well done.
Now, Wyatt, though, you're not entirely without any acting chops yourself. I mean, I was there at Canada Life, although I will say, just as a quick add-on to Jim's thing, of course, where I sit in the press box, a lot of the scouts sit to the left of me, and it was funny because watching, I don't remember how recent, it was relatively recently, and they were watching this and they're like, are these guys players or are they actors? Like they're like, I think those are players. And then you could hear them kind of picking out the players and they were kind of confused. They didn't know exactly who was who, but you did get a chance. I think something about it. I think you just had an acting gig for the Moose. You did a little read over of the, I think, what was it, like the spy versus spy thing. So you had a small role there.
Yeah, you're right. And I think, I don't know yet. It might be a solo performance. So I didn't have very many words or lines, but they did ask me to do something for them. So I'm always happy to step in when these guys ask something out of us.
I see we're having a little bit of problem with my mic, so I've adjusted something. Let me know if that still works. You guys got me, and that's good. All right. Sorry about that to all the listeners and watchers here. Well, game tomorrow, New Year's Eve game, the rematch. What do you make of it? How do you go into it? What are you feeling about it?
I think that we showed spurts of really good hockey last night, and I think that it's really important for us to take those positive moments. Delia made some unbelievable saves. We can take these things and we can build on them. It's going to be tough. I think that we can get more physical with them. They're skilled. They're good off the rush. It's no secret that they score a lot of goals. So being able to defend our own end and keep the game simple and play forward, we can go to work on their defensemen. So, again, we didn't obviously want to drop this one last night, but moving forward, what can we do to capitalize on Sunday? So, we look ahead.
Well, you'll be looking ahead with 7,000 fans plus in the building and fireworks at the end of the game. So hopefully it ends up being a good one for you and the team. Wyatt, we appreciate you joining us. Toll, reliably informed you have a meeting right now, so we're going to let you go and we're going to keep things rolling. But thanks a lot for joining us.
We don't have time for the Bon Jovi question. You know who Bon Jovi is? Do you ever get that handle in college or?
You got to get that one in quick, Jim, because I'm reliably informed that they have a meeting right now. So,
okay.
Is there any Bon Jovi? Did you get Bon Jovi references? Why with your last name?
I always get some small ones, but nothing that ever really stuck. So it was always small little comments. Hey, it sounds a little bit like Bon Jovi or whatever it might be. But
that's because you're not 120 years old like I am, Wyatt. So thanks for joining us. Enjoy your meeting.
Or from
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, we're from New Jersey. Yeah.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Wyatt. We really appreciate you joining us this morning. He's heading out to a meeting, and we are going to keep things rolling here on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Good young man, Wyatt. Really good talker, mature. He's 24 years old, but he's a. Hey, maybe we'll get Daniel Fink. He was shutting down the computer there. We can get Daniel to finish off the last part of this interview. But Wyatt's a good kid, and again, the one thing I've noticed about him is he's got a very good shot. And again, he had a slow start to a season, Jim, but he's one of those players like along the lines of Parker Ford, Jeff Malott, the guys that the Jets go and recruit out of college, and they become really good pros. And whether that turns into, an NHL situation for them, even a Christian Reichel, there's another guy who, who's been a really good, it's funny. He almost feels like a Jets draft pick because he was at so many development camps and training camps when he was with Red Deer, but they've done a very good job in the organization, not just obviously of drafting, but also of getting these guys out of college to sign here and then turning them into, whether they ever end up being Jets players, obviously that's the question mark and that's the goal, but they always end up being good pros in the American Hockey League.
Yeah, I always find it fascinating when they bring in an undrafted player because Craig Heisinger and Larry Simmons and the whole crew, but I go back to the original days of the Moose before the Jets came from Atlanta, and I remember the story. Like I remember Kevin Bieksa arriving here. I remember Brandon Tanev with the Jets coming in, with the Moose, and there's not a lot of misses when it comes to players out of college for Heisinger and the staff there. So that's why I was wondering about him. And you nailed it for 24 years old and just into his second full season. Very mature guy. I didn't know much about him other than his stats. And I think I've seen him play for 1 or 2 games last season, Dave. I haven't been to a game yet this year, full disclosure. But I really like him. He seems like a Jet organizational player, right? Like even the stuff about leadership and we're all in this together and the language barrier and all that. Like that's what I was interested in finding out from him is that's what they love in this organization when they're picking undrafted players or signing them out of college. And it looks like he's another good one.
Well, and it's funny because that's the one thing with this team and why it hit on it. And it's one thing we've talked about oftentimes with the Moose is that they really do have a team of leaders. And whether it is guys who are former captains or guys who didn't necessarily wear a letter, whether it was in junior or college, but they all have leadership qualities. And, Tyrell Bauer, who T. Konopali is going to be excited that I'm mentioning Tyrell Bauer, but, he's the captain of the Seattle Thunderbirds. You have a lot of guys who I could list who have all worn, some sort of leadership, or had played some sort of leadership role. And the important thing for this team is that the voice of the young players is the same as the voice of the older players. And, you see Jimmy Olney, like he was there last night. He's still, even though, of course, he's done essentially for the season, but you still see him around and he still creates that very positive leadership. He brings a lot of positive leadership qualities to this team. Like I said, it's an important element for this Moose Club to have, because that's one of the things that you're trying to create is that foundational level. And it's, it ties into the idea of the Jets, Jim, right? Because part of the big thing with Rick Bowness is the whole idea of that you want to have everyone feel like they've got a piece and have a voice. And that was the thing they didn't feel like prior, and that they definitely didn't feel like last year, obviously, because it was essentially the same group, just with kind of a slightly different structure in terms of leadership. But now it seems like that's different. And you see it with the Jets. And again, I think it's an important foundational element to be taught at the AHL level that they can bring forward into the NHL to feel like, hey, you know what? You've only been on this team for a week, but if you want to have a voice, if you want to say something, you don't have to be quiet for 5 years before you're allowed to say something.
Yeah, it's interesting too. Like we talked about the penalty kill, and you brought up Kevin Stenlund and Sacramento Line, and and everybody having a piece of it. And you made a valid point that there's, especially Mandalorian, there's only certain things he could do.
Right.
But he was a big part of it. Like I remember Stenlin coming over the boards to take, I forget if it's left or right, whatever Lowry is in faceoffs in the last 3 minutes, like because they couldn't have a opposite hand faceoff win to save their lives, and he would literally come over the boards and take one and then go back. Everyone had a piece of it. Like that was their role, Menelainen and Stenlin, right? But you need more all-around players, and they have that with Gustafsson now and those guys on the penalty kill. But to your point of what the Moose are doing, like that's the important part. I always harken back to when the Moose are coming from St. John's. And Craig Heinz, the first interview he did, I was back at CJB2, and not the first interview he did, he made this widely known, but when he came on the show, he said, I'm just going to tell you and all your fans right now out of the gate, before we get started, this is not going to be a trying to win a Calder Cup. We're going to win, but we are development. We are, and you were there, Dave, over the years where, the Matt Halischuk's and the Patrice Cormiers were around, and down a goal with 38 seconds to go on a face-off in the offensive end, and it was the rookies coming over the board. It was Chase DeLeo, and it was those guys.
Yep.
And Keith McCambridge, was coaching, and that's tough, right? Because the guys on the bench know, no offense to the rookies, but we'd like to win a game. We'd like to tie this. Yeah. But that wasn't what the Moose were about. The Moose were specifically about getting the prospects in the key situations, like down a goal with 38 seconds to go. Can they win a faceoff? Can they get the puck to the net? And that kind of development for this team. But along the way, they become like a Jets team, right? Like that's what they want to filter down all the way to the East Coast Hockey League, and that's what they want to develop is we want to develop players as opposed to just, like when the Moose were here, there was no Jets. They just wanted to win a Calder. And they would bring in pros, they'd bring in veterans, they'd bring everything else. This is a development team. It's all about getting them to the Jets. If they win along the way, that's outstanding. But I'm looking at this team and this roster, and I don't think anybody can look at it, even with Wyatt and what he's done so far in his tenure here, and go, well, they built the championship roster here. But what they've built is what you touched on, is that everybody's a piece of it, hone your game, get better, develop, and see where this goes with your career. Winning would help for sure. I'm not saying they're not going to take that opportunity, but it's always been about developing players and making sure the system is thick with them. And for the past 2 seasons, not to go on and on here, but when we've looked at what's in the cupboard, I've always thought it was pretty bare. And then I've gone to a Moose game, and I'm like, they have more. We focus so heavily on the first-round picks.
Yeah,
they have more depth than I think a lot of teams think. And I'm not saying that depth is ready. I'm not saying it's a year away. But this is another roster that they're 2 games below 500 now. I know it's about winning percentage in the American Hockey League. Yeah. But they have some really good depth players here that are developing. So good for Wyatt to see that and come here and develop his game, but also try and get this team to win some games.
Yeah, no, and you're absolutely right. But look at you see what the benefit of that is, right? David Gustafsson is capable of going in, and we saw that with, whether it was Pascal Vincent or Mark Morrison, when these guys have these young players, they put them into those situations, like you said, with 30 seconds to go in a game. You need to win a faceoff. David Gustafsson's the guy who's taking the draw, or Dylan Sandberg is out for a critical, PK at the end of a hockey game or at any point in the hockey game. The point is you develop these guys, and then when they get to the NHL, they're ready and they've played those roles. And that's, of course, the most important thing. And that's one thing we've talked about. Like, that's why I said there's no rush. People get upset when I say, look, Brad Lambert's not getting the recall. I know you want Brad Lambert recalled or Nikita Chibrikov because Kyle Connor goes down, but it's not happening, because they're developing those guys in specific roles, and so they want those guys. And look, those guys have flaws in their game, and it's easy. Mark Morrison, if Lambert was on for, let's say, 2 or 3 goals last night, it's easy for Mark Morrison to throw him back out there and say, okay, well, learn from your mistake, go back and be better. It's different for Rick Bowness. He's not throwing Brad Lambert out because he made a mistake that led to a goal against. And the point is that can really do harm to a young player's confidence. So the fact of the matter is that, and you've got guys who, to be honest with you, deserve the recall because they put in the time and they're capable. So, I mean, I'm not saying Dominic Tonnato, but I'm just saying specifically that you don't want to harm what your plan is. And that's the long-term vision for the organization. And that's to develop Lambert as a center, Chibrikov's a winger. You've got Jilkin as a center. You're giving these young guys those opportunities with the Moose. And again, like I said, you might not like it. You might want instant gratification. We talked about it with Craig Button, a few weeks back. but you have to realize that it takes time for these guys to develop properly. And look, even in we saw last night in the Stars game, Logan Stankoven, I can barely pronounce his name, and Maverick Bork, those guys are leading the AHL in scoring right now. And one is a 2020 draft pick, and the other is a 2021 draft pick. But the point is that it takes time. But look what they're getting, and that's going to serve Dallas very well in the future, that you've got these two young guys who are tearing up the AHL, and again, not that far behind them, you've got Chibrikov and Lambert, who are leading the Moose in scoring and are doing quite well from a rookie perspective. So I'm just saying it takes time, takes development. But this isn't just about the Manitoba Moose, Jim. It's about the Winnipeg Jets. We've got lots to talk about. The Minnesota Wild, the Jets, they're doing battle at 1 o'clock. Of course, you can join us after the game on the Illegal Curve post-game show. Not Jim, because we're not asking him to do two shows. He's already fighting through it right now for us. So we appreciate Jim.
Upper body injury.
He's got an upper body injury.
Upper neck injury. We
don't want it to develop into a lower body injury as well. So we're just going to ask Jim to soldier on for one more hour here on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We're going to head to break, and we'll come back from that break, talk about the Winnipeg Jets. We'll be right back after these words from our sponsors.
Keeping Winnipeg laughing for over 30 years. Rumors, Canada's longest-running comedy club, bringing you the biggest laughs from the best comedians on the planet. Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Jon Stewart, Dennis Miller, Brad Garrett, the greats, and all the up-and-comers too. When was the last time you laughed out loud? Make it a great night out with friends, or book your office or birthday party. Even a fundraising event at Rumors. Get all the details and dates on upcoming shows at rumorscomedyclub.com.
Whoa, Ezzy, everything okay? You look stressed.
Of course I'm stressed. We're moving, the house is upside down, the kids failed miserably at packing the fine china, and my life is in chaos. Chaos!
Yes, that does sound like a problem.
What am I going to do?
Ezzy, relax. Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage is the answer. With 60 years of experience in moving Manitobans and a track record of exemplary customer service, one call to Rolly's and your stress is gone. No job is too big or too small. Just visit Rollies.com and they will take it from there.
Thanks, Dave, and thank you, Rollies Transfer Moving and Storage, online at Rollies.com.
Hey, Drew.
Ezzy, whoa, what a smile!
Yeah, I got my crowns done at Linden Market Dental Center, and they whiten my teeth.
I see.
They're so bright that every time I smile, they go...
We have hockey tonight. Do you have a mouth guard to protect those pearly whites?
I sure do.
Whoa, they even ting through the mouth guard.
Linden Market Dental Center covers all your dental needs from restorative to cosmetic dentistry and will fit you with a sports guard for that active lifestyle. 877 Waverly. See lindenmarketdental.com.
Boston Pizza harnessed Fanalytics to test if the game is better at home or at Boston Pizza. The results are irrefutable. Catch the game at Boston Pizza, powered by Fanalytics.
So you're a pizza person, you married a wing person, but somehow your kids are salad people. You can't pick your fam, but you can pick your BP meal deal, starting from $18.99 for takeout or delivery at bostonpizza.com.
We did it again!
You're on fire, man.
There's power in a handshake after a great game or great deal. It shows professionalism and respect. Two qualities Zappia Group Realty take pride in. You don't build a business where 95% of your clients are referred by others without honesty, integrity, and total dedication to client satisfaction. To sell your home for more in less time, shake hands with Frank and Mauro Zappia of Zappia Group Realty. Get started at ZappiaGroup.com.
Welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Hour 1 in the books. Hour 2 about to get going. I am Dave Minuk, today's temporary host. Drew will be returning next week. The trio, Mendel, Minuk, and Ginsburg. But for today, it's Minuk and Jim Toth of 680 CJOB. Jimmy is fighting through it, dealing with some illness, but he is soldiering on, and we appreciate the effort on this Saturday morning. You know, Jim, we got to talk about the Jets and Wild, of course, that game coming up. And if you looked at it on paper, you'd like, oh, well, it's the third place team in the Central versus the seventh place team. But these are not a seventh place Minnesota Wild. 11-3-0 since the coaching change, removing Dean Evanson from the bench and installing John Hines as the head coach. I don't know. I mean, again, I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on the Minnesota Wild, Jim. I haven't been closely following, every Minnesota Wild game, but you can't help but notice. I will say I did watch the game before the Jets played the Bruins. I believe the Wild and Bruins played on the Tuesday night, and I watched in Boston. And I happened to have I was at Joey's and I watched that game. And you know what, Jim? It was an interesting one because Minnesota was down. They tied it late, then won an OT, and they looked feisty. And I thought, ooh, these guys look like they could be a problem for the Jets. And even though it's they were far back of Winnipeg and still remain 8 points back, which of course makes this series this 2-game set with Minnesota so important. These guys are on a roll and they're looking good and they're feeling confident. So what have you seen from Minnesota, or what do you expect, again, from this Wild team to this afternoon and again tomorrow?
Well, I agree with you. I caught the end of that Boston-Minnesota game in the overtime as well. And I thought just that, like Matt Zuccarello is not in this lineup. He's on the IR. But the coaching change has really given them a bump. They're 7-3 in their last 10, and they've won 4 in a row. So I think this is an interesting matchup, especially with the way the Jets are playing. It starts here in Winnipeg and then goes down to Minnesota back-to-back. And we were just talking to Wyatt about the back-to-back games or the weekends, Friday, Sunday games in the American Hockey League. I think the NHL needs more of these back-to-back games, especially in proximity. I really like them. But it's what Wyatt said about the Moose, really. They have to win this first one at home. Mm-hmm. And then you go down on the road, and Minnesota's going to have a little bit of an extra jump in their step if they take a loss here. But I think they match up well. I think they're finally getting some goaltending in Minnesota. Goaltending was a big problem, and they're finally getting some consistency in that level. But like they put up 5 goals, I believe, on Boston, including the overtime winner. They're scoring a bit too. Matt Bodley is coming around, whom I really like him as a player. So it's interesting that they've gotten this success and these wins under the new head coach, especially with Matt Zuccarello out of the lineup. I think he's an underrated player in the National Hockey League, Dave, but I think he rounds out a top 6 real nice. I think, and what I mean by that is he's one of those guys that when you take him out, like if you have a decent top 6 or a decent top line and you take him out of that, but when we talk about specialty teams too, right? And Matt Zuccarello is really good on the power play. So it's interesting that they're 7-3 and won 4 in a row, including one in Boston. Just the other night, given the fact that the coaching changes come in, I didn't really think this was a roster that a coaching bump would do this to be honest with you. I think they were feeling that cap pinch. I think Bill Guerin has got himself into trouble with a really young team and having to deal with that cap crunch of buying out Suter and Parise and where they go from here. So all I can say is coming into this game is I'm impressed. I'm impressed with how they are. I thought they would be 7th or 8th, and I thought that's where they would finish. But to have won 7 of their last 10 and 4 in a row, they're on a heater, and the Jets have to be ready for this one.
Yeah, and you mentioned the trouble in Minnesota. It seems like there's trouble on and off the ice, and that's with all the turmoil and Bill Guerin and the assistant general manager leaving there, you weren't really sure if it was going to filter down. But you're right, and there's lots of articles about Marc-Andre Fleury. I think it's going to be Gustafsson in net. I think I saw Michael Russo, who covers the Wild, say that it's going to be Gustafsson in net, and he's been really good for Minnesota. So I mean, that'll be a tall task. It'll be a good battle for Connor Hellebuck, who loves these afternoon games. So that'll be interesting to see what happens between those two, whether it's a low scoring affair. But look, you're right, Jim. It's such an important, it sounds so obvious. It's so important to get off to a good start and to have a good game today because, again, you're feeling good. You still played a solid game against Chicago, and you've been obviously a very good, I think I just had the comment up from Joe, but these are 2 of the best teams in the Central. But it's also psychological. If you can go from an 8-point advantage to a 10-point. Now you're in double digits above Minnesota. That's significant versus 6, because now suddenly you're a little bit nervous. You're like, well, because that's Central, and it's worth mentioning. It's not just Minnesota that's doing well. Arizona's still doing well. Nashville, even though they lost an OT yesterday, they're still doing well. So it's not like before it looked like the top 3 teams in the Central were going to kind of separate themselves. Instead, now it's basically all 7 teams except for Chicago are doing really well.
Yeah, even St. Louis can give you a game, right? And I think that's why Craig Berube got fired in St. Louis was some nights, even with their roster, they play hard and get wins. And other nights with their roster, they look like the worst team in the National Hockey League. And it's that inconsistency that I think has cost Craig Berube his job. But that's another roster in St. Louis that I look at Minnesota and go, you know, if they can get some wins, good for them. It's not something that I think could win the division or finish in the top 3, but yet on any given night, like they can hurt you. They did the other night. So it's interesting. Like right now, Arizona's the hottest team. They have 2 wins in a row in the division. Next to Minnesota. Minnesota's won 4 in a row. So Arizona's won 2 in a row. They're not going away, right? Like they're 19-4-2, 14-2, and have 40 points, just 4 back of the Jets. Now, the Jets' big deal is, and going into this weekend is key to what you're saying, Dave, is they have played 33 games and have 44 points. They have 1 less than Dallas, who has 2 more points, and they have 3 less games than Colorado, but they're 3 points behind Colorado. This is a big weekend series, not just to distance yourself from the Minnesota Wild, but you've got to win those games, right? And credit to Colorado. They've played 3 more games, but they've got 3 more points than the Jets. The Jets have to do the same with those 3 games. They have to get points out of all 3 of them to continue to fight for first place in the division. And this is a big weekend of it. I think Jets fans could be disappointed if the Jets don't get 3 or 4 points this weekend. I think they got to win one of these games, and then, you know, back to back, and you know, say they lose this one. I don't think they will, but if they lose this one today, they've got to get that one in Minnesota. But if they win today and can go down to Minnesota and get a point, but I don't think 4 points is out of the realm of asking for that. And this team could improve to 22-9-4 and have 48 points by the time the weekend's done. That's what you have to do when you have games in hand. You have 1 in Dallas and 3 in Colorado. Minnesota has played the exact same amount of games as you. So if you could get 3 or 4 points this weekend, and as you said, distance yourself from Minnesota, but also make the most out of those games in hand on Colorado and Dallas, you could really propel yourself into the new year.
And one of the opportunities the Jets are going to have to get that power play moving, and we talked, you know, I think Scott Billick tweeted it yesterday. That was the first thing they started, which was unusual for Winnipeg. I was still in transit, Jim. I wasn't down at practice, but Scotty talked about the fact that the Jets started with the power play, and that's what their focus was power play. And Minnesota's PK, again, I believe it was Michael Russo of The Athletic talking about how their PK has been bad, and that's the one area they're really, you know, trying to shore up right now. So, I mean, if you're the Jets and you get opportunities, and we know that, you know, Minnesota plays a physical brand of hockey, here's an opportunity at least to get your power play going, which is going to be a big opportunity for the Winnipeg Jets to you know, take 2 points out of tonight's game.
Well, we're at that time of the year too, Dave, as you know, like it's hard to change something at this point of the season. It's really hard system-wise or to do something. So when I read that yesterday too, that they started practice by working on the power play. This has been a month now where they'll stay longer, or they'll say there's a 40-minute practice and a good, you know, 12, 15 minutes of it was spent on the power play. That's what they should be practicing on right now, to be honest with you. Like the 5-on-5 is good. They want to improve the penalty kill. But, you know, I agree with Rick Bowness when he said it's cost them 5 or 6 games this year. And like you said, take those 5 or 6 games and get 3 wins out of it because of the power play. You're leading the division right now with 3 games in hand as opposed to being 3 games behind. So I agree with you. I think that's going to be a key part to this weekend, is getting that power play working against a bad penalty kill. When you can move your feet and draw some penalties like this team can, or get in on the forecheck, you got to take advantage of it. I can't. It's at the time of the year where I was glad that you see them practicing, Dave, because you can't go on another month with saying they were 0 for 5 on the power play or 1 for 6. Like, it has to start clicking. It has to start doing some damage. If they get 5 power plays today, they've got to capitalize on 2 of them today.
Well, you know, and Jim, you know, it's interesting because one of the things that Rick Bowness said yesterday in his availability was they're not going to have much practice time for the next.
Exactly. They got a lot of games.
They've got a lot of games, and the schedule has been very favorable for the Winnipeg Jets. And you could tell when Rick Bowness, Scott Arniel were asked about it earlier in the season. Rick Bowness was asked about it at the beginning. Scott Arniel, when he was, you know, looking after the coaching responsibilities when Rick was away, that was one of the things they spoke about, was they were enjoying this schedule. And so you knew that if Winnipeg was enjoying the schedule, it was if they're talking about it in a positive manner based on the way the schedule, generally speaking, is for this organization, locate because of the geography and all that stuff. You knew that they were happy with things. And again, it's going to get a little tighter. And that's one of the issues for guys who are coming back. And Rasmus Kupari, and we know David Gustafsson won't be playing this weekend. He's dealing with the lower body issue. But Rick Bowness said he was skating in advance of the team skating yesterday, and he is expecting that he'll be fine, but just not right away. Rasmus Kupari, he's hoping he might play, on the when they go away, when they go to, I think they're going to Anaheim and San Jose. I believe there's a 3-game road trip there. So,
and Arizona, I think,
and Arizona, right. I knew there was a third team. I couldn't remember exactly which one, but the point is, and it's interesting actually, Jim, and I'll get your thoughts on this. We've seen Declan Chisholm go down on a conditioning assignment. I was thinking to myself, like, if I'm the Jets and I've got Rasmus Kupari and you don't have a lot of practice time, why not send him on a conditioning assignment? Send him down to the Moose and let him play, 3, 4, 5 games in a row and get it's funny. Like Rick Bowness has been loath to talk about Ville Heinola going to the Moose when that time comes. And I'm thinking to myself, what's the big deal? I mean, I guess it could discourage him, but you're not banishing a player. You're simply saying your body is not conditioned to play hockey right now. Here's an opportunity to get games conditioned where we don't have to worry about you hurting us as a hockey team and then having a negative effect overall. So the idea that conditioning assignments are so like a negative, and to me, it's just a tool that you have at your disposal. And when you have tools, you use them.
Yeah, I'm twofold on that. I agree with what you're saying. And then I also say that maybe in the discussions with him when he came in the summer and then through training camp and at the end of camp is you're in the NHL. Like, you've made it. That's where we see you as that. Now, I think if the best thing for him was a conditioning stint, they wouldn't shy away from that. But I also think that with young players, they like to go, hey, you've arrived, you've made it. So this is where you're going to go. So it's kind of twofold, right? It's what were the conversations had with the player? Where's he at? But to your point, Dave, I think anybody coming off a multi-week injury should get some games in the AHL. What your point is to get their feet under them and try and go. And what they do with that is the opposite, is like what they did with Gabe Vilardi. They start him on the third line and play him 12 or 14 minutes. Then they elevate his minutes and go from there. But to me, I think Rasmus Kupari was told at the start of the year that you made it. You're a big part of our future. We're happy to have you here. We know the LA Kings maybe had you up and down, but you're solidified your spot. We have a bright future for you, and that's probably the way the conversations have gone. So that's why I think that he might not. You mentioned Ville Heinola, and that's going to be really interesting, right? Because he made the team out of camp. So that goes back to our whole talk with Wyatt Giovanni earlier about being with the Moose and developing and all that. People forget with him that he made the team this year, and it was he was looking to be on the National Hockey League roster. And for everybody who keeps saying the development and they're ruining these players, they're not. Like, he was on the team this year. It's paid off. Now, I know Billy, through his agent, asked for a trade, and I've gone on about this on Jets at Noon on 680 CJB several times, that's an agent, like Logan Stanley's agent, going, I need to get you a contract next year, and you have no resume.
Right.
So you need to get out of there. These are our options. I need to get you to a place where maybe last year at the deadline, you can play 20 games and get something that looks good going forward.
Yeah.
But Kevin Cheveldayoff doesn't care about that stuff, and neither does the Jets, right? What they care about is, Ville, when you make this team, which he did this year, you're ready to go. And I don't mean like 8-9 minutes. I mean like ready to go 12, 14 minutes, 5-6 pairing. And that's how they handled Sandberg too, right? Like, he went back to college and signed a contract. Then he came in, but when he was ready to go, it was 50-some games. Conditioning stints are interesting. I think Ville needs one because he hasn't played hockey at all this year. And that's what's different for me than Rasmus Kupari, who looked really good at points at times when he came in, still has his issues and flaws as well. But if he doesn't get and the other part is, I think they're going to California. Like, he's not going to play this weekend, but they said maybe on the road trip. So it tells me he's not going to play Tuesday against Tampa Bay. So I just don't think they're going to send in a Moose, call him back up, and then head out on the road that way. But to me, it's all about the conversations you've had. And if you've told a young player like that who just got traded that you're on this team and a big part of our future, and now maybe he might go give me a game or two with the Moose, but I doubt it. So, and plus his role on the fourth line, it'd be different if he's going to be asked to play 15, 16 minutes, which he's not. So
right. Yeah. I mean, and that's true. You can shelter a guy like Rasmus Kupari. I just think, like, again, it'll be interesting to see what they do with Ville Heinola, because it's going to look, if all is, and it's the NHL, right? Like, every 5 minutes, a guy's getting injured, right? You've got Kyle Connor, who's going to be not back till expected, sometime early in February. So you do have that roster space if you need to carry, but eventually it's going to come to a head where, Ville Heinola's ready. And then you've got Stanley and Chisholm, and you're going to have to figure something out. And so I guess that'll lead into my next, our next topic until we bring Hustle.
By the way, Tico Napoli says he could use a conditioning stint. I'm with you, buddy. As soon as I get over this head cold, that's why I got sick. I think I'm getting a conditioning stint too. It's time.
Well, Jim, they sent you to the minors. They sent you from CJOB down to the legal curve.
No. I just went back to Europe to play in that pro league so I can get over this cold. That's all.
Well, we appreciate you.
No minors here. This is top shelf league.
This is the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. I'm Dave Minuk. He's Jim Toth. We're chatting Jets. We're chatting Moose. Folks know that when Drew and Ezzy are away, I'm going to take an opportunity to talk about the Manitoba Moose. But now that we've done that for a significant portion this morning, Jim, we're talking about the Jets. And, one of the things we talked about, of course, with Heinola and Kupari and obviously Kyle Connor, Kyle Connor will almost be like a trade addition, if you will, especially if the Jets can keep things rolling and keep this winning alive without, the guy who was, it's interesting, right? We're the big concern when Kyle Connor went down with injury. 17 goals leading. No other Jet was even in double digits when Kyle Connor was at 17, and he looked like he was on pace for 60 this year. It was going to be, a remarkable season for him. But when he goes down, and the thought was, where's the scoring going to come from? And yet somehow the scoring continued, and guys are contributing. And now you've got multiple guys, getting into the double digits, and you have contributions up and down the lineup from guys, being able to do that. But to me, the question I have for you, Jim, now is, if you were GM Kevin Cheveldayoff and you had a chance to, have conversations, as we know he likes to do, what type of conversation are you having, knowing that you're going to have Kyle Connor back in February, knowing that you're going to have a situation with Heinola, Stanley, Chisholm to decide relatively soon? What are you doing as GM of this team to shore things up for what you hope to be a long playoff run?
Well, I think shoring up is the key word there. Like, I think if you can get better at something on the line, you would do it. But I keep looking at, and I'm not stealing any thunder from, I read the Athletics piece with Chris Johnston and Pierre LeBrun, where they thought the top, 5 guys would go. I think they look at second line center, and this isn't a knock on Nemestikov or anybody who's been filling in there. But if you could bring in an Elias Lindholm, if you could bring in a Sean Monahan, and I agree with what that Athletic article had from LeBrun and Johnston about Sean Monahan. I think that's a $2 million cap hit. I think he's a UFA at the end of the year. I don't think he'll cost you as much as Elias Lindholm. And I think Lindholm is going to go somewhere like a Colorado or Boston where he's going to sign an extension, right? Like that's what he's looking for. Monahan you could bring in and decide whether you wanted to bring him back or not. I'll have to look at the cap, Dave, but I don't think there's room to bring a Monahan in and say he does really well. Saying at the deadline he has 25 points in 23 games and just fits in perfectly in that top 6 to give him $3 or $4 million. It's really interesting with what they want to do with the defense. And I think Mike McIntyre, the Free Press, had an article this week about Brendan Dillon and Dylan DeMello, who are now the next UFAs, and they'd like to know where they're at. It's not like to know, but it'd be nice to know where we stand when you see guys like Niederreiter and Hellebuck and Scheifele get locked up. But I see kind of a move like that. Is the fact that if you could bring in at a relatively low cost of a second round pick and maybe a prospect to bring in Sean Monahan, I think that's a fair deal for the Montreal Canadiens, and maybe a 3rd round pick if Chevy can work some magic and it's not the top 2. But I think if you could bring in a Sean Monahan and either play him in that top 6 or put him in the bottom 6, I don't think you're going to break up that Lowry Niederreiter line. So I think that you bring in, Sean Monahan for a pick and a prospect on your 4th line adds a ton of depth to this team. And then you can put him on the power play and stuff like that too. But that's what I think. The defense is real interesting to me because I think one of them is going. I think one of them is going in a package. And I don't know if it's Logan Stanley. I don't know if it's Declan Chisholm. But I think that they're not going to want to give up their depth on the blue line. But if you could maybe ship Logan Stanley in a 3rd round pick or a 2nd round pick to Montreal and get Monahan, I think you might be doing that, right? The pick would be what Montreal wants, but they can use D too. So I think you're going to augment. I don't think you're going to see a big splash, but I the last time they had a roster like this, they went and got Paul Stastny.
Yep.
So that's why I don't doubt that they're calling about Lindholm. I just don't think that's going to happen because I think that's going to be 3 or 4 assets, maybe 3 assets on an expiring contract.
Yeah.
So probably 2 to 3 assets for that. That's why I like the Monahan, but I think they're kicking the tires on that. I think, that second line center spot, I don't think there's a trade out there that you would move your Kyle Connor, your Nick Ehlers, your Gabe Velarde out of your top 6, your Cole Perfetti. I don't think there's a player out there you go, okay, Cole, you're now going down to the third line or something like that.
Right.
What I do think there's a trade out there is a second line center. I think you could go into Messikov, you're our 4th line center because we got Sean Monahan here. Or, he's not playing well, so we'll keep you there. That's the move I'm looking at. And then on the defense, I think that maybe it's for the forward or maybe it's to bring in a different defenseman, like a veteran D with a bigger contract, and you give them a younger D like a Stanley or a Declan Chisholm in exchange. You'd get the veteran presence for the playoff run, and they get a good young prospect to take that spot on their roster. Those are the 2 kind of deals I've sort of have in my mind.
Yeah, and again, Jim is GM. That's what we're gonna call that segment. Maybe we'll have a regular segment here on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show, Jim. But no, look, that seems to be what everyone is talking about, right? Whether you're going to be able to bring in someone, and look, I'll give Ezzy credit because Ezzy's been talking about Sean Monahan. It feels like for at least 2 seasons now. So we're always happy to give Ez credit here on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show when his Ginsburg guarantees come true, even if it is 2-3 years later than he originally made it. But he just said he saw Monahan as a player who fit well potentially with the Jets, and we've seen some of the comments from the chat saying how Monahan really seems to have sorted out his health related issues and could be a good fit here, and he's not as costly. Calgary wants quite a bit for Lindholm, so that's going to cost you more. And like you said, the Jets, I mean, from my look at the cap, because we had a cap conversation a few weeks back, I want to say, and the Jets don't really have a ton of room because you've got the Scheifele, and even if the cap's going up $4.5 million, $5 million, Scheifele and Hellebuck are essentially taking that, and you've still got to give Cole Perfetti a new contract for next year. I think David Gustafsson, I mean, that's not a significant one. Neither of those really are. You'll probably bridge Perfetti, but the fact of the matter is you're going to have to make some money. And we could talk a Nate Schmidt buyout over the summer. That's always a possibility, or a trade, of course. But like I said, there's not a ton of latitude, even with an increase in the cap for the Jets. And
the thing about the Schmidt buyout is now you're adding it for 1 year of the Wheeler buyout, right?
Yeah.
And so now you got 2 buyouts sitting there. I think it's more advantageous to the team if they're going to move Schmidt's contract to do it with a player.
Yeah.
So if a team wants a veteran D, I think you send Schmidt and Logan Stanley or somebody like that with a pick, and that's how you offset the eating of the cap. But I'm not sure they want to get rid of Nate Schmidt this season. I'm not sure about that, Dave. I think if they could add a Monahan with the limited cap space they have and go into the playoffs, and then in the offseason look at moving Schmidt's contract. We've kicked this around for a couple of shows on Jet Set Noon as well, and what's the number one commodity when it comes to the trade deadline? It's veteran D-man, right? And so I just don't think they're going to do a deal like that and then, say it's Chisholm or Logan Stanley, and then one of those guys go down in the playoffs. I think they want Nate Schmidt for the playoffs. I think that's the guy they would be looking for, is a veteran like that. So I just think he's here until the summer, and then if they need that room, then they go, okay, here's two defensemen if you take this contract or something like that.
Yeah, and I agree. And I look, ultimately, I think Nate Schmidt, I mean, his play hasn't been terrible. I mean, there's been obviously some.
It's gotten better.
It's gotten better for sure. And I think obviously sitting for 4 straight games kind of was a wake up call for the veteran blue liner. But I think you're right. I think ideally what you do, look, DeMello and Morrissey have been a very good pairing. And Pionk has been much better this season. I mean, obviously there's been some situations, but he's been much better rebounded from what it was a poor season last year. And I think if you can shift Pionk down into almost your third pairing, and then you have someone, in that 2 pairing, and then the second hole, and then ultimately maybe have, Schmidt as your 7th, and give you a little bit of that idea of a veteran opportunity there, because you're not bringing it up from the prospects. They're not ready to go. So that's not coming. It's not coming from within. So ultimately, that to me is the bigger question mark, is can you find that player potentially to pair with Brendan Dillon, on that second pairing, and leave the Morrissey and DeMello pairing alone. I know we talk about oftentimes, but DeMello's been very good in my mind with Josh Morrissey. So to me, it's more about finding, because again, it's about cost, right, Jim? And I know we got to go because we got to go to break because we're going to have Hustler coming on. But just a quick final thought from you.
Yeah, final thought is, what do you do with DeMello and Dylan? Now, I like everything about Dylan DeMello and the pairing with Josh Morrissey, but is that not Ville Heinola's future? Like, I know a lot of people are going to say take Nate Schmidt's part 5-6 for now, but what's the long-term picture? Is the long-term picture not Morrissey and Heinola? And it might not be, right? It might not be offense. It might be defense, stay-at-home D-man like DeMello with Morrissey. But the one guy I lean more and more towards, and this seems ridiculous to say, Dave, but I can't get it out of my head, is they need Brendan Dillon. They need that big, tough, physical presence with Sandberg. Those are the two guys that they need to offset the Morrisseys and the Heinolas and the DeMellos. So I hate to say it because you'd like to keep them both, or at least I would.
Yeah.
But if there's a guy in the system I just think that they can fill this spot, it's probably DeMello more so than Dillon. Now, Tyrell Bauer is coming up. That could be your Dillon. Depends what they think of them. But to me, it's those two guys. Like, who do you lose? And if it's Dillon, then is Bauer ready? And if it's DeMello, is Heinola ready? And I think Heinola's ready. So to me, that's the most fascinating thing going into not only the deadline, but the offseason is, what do you do with those two D-men? Because I know they want them both, or they should want them both.
And of course, it's being mentioned in the chat, and worth noting, Elias Salamonson, he's a guy that he stuck around a lot longer than I expected. I expected him after development camp head back to play for Schlefka. He sounded like he was expecting to go back and play for Schlefka, and then he stuck around a lot longer. And I know that the Jets and Moose were considering things heavily with him, but of course he's currently at the World Juniors with a very powerful Sweden team. So he's a young guy, obviously, but he's got a lot of potential on that right side. So I know a lot of folks are excited to see what he can bring. Let's head to, it's a good conversation. It's a conversation I suspect we'll be having throughout the 23-24 season until there's some sort of resolution in that front. But for now, we'll head to commercial break. And when we come back, the man, the myth, the legend, Andrew Hustler Patterson from Winnipeg Sports Talk will be joining us for some more Jets talk on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show on this Saturday morning. We're leading into the Jets and Wild game coming up at 1 o'clock. Of course, after the game, join us here on the Illegal Curve post-game show. But for now, bringing in the man, the myth, the legend, Hustlerama. I wish we had some music to cue up as Huss comes on to discuss the Jets. Hey, Huss, how are you?
What's up, fellas?
Andy, how are you, sir?
I am. I'm doing well. I'm fired up for this game this afternoon, guys.
Well,
this has been
party time. So let me turn this around for you. Let's go. Let's get going.
No, I'd prefer it if it was a 7 o'clock start. But I don't think this is going to be one of these sort of lazy 1 p.m. matinee games. I'm sure I wasn't the only one that immediately looked at when are the Wild coming here when the schedule came out, considering the way things finished up between these two clubs last year.
Yeah, no, there's no question about it. This is going to be it won't necessarily be friendly Manitoba versus Minnesota nice. We'll see. There should be some festivities, some on ice entertainment, I suspect, between these two teams. Some physical play.
Seasons beatings, may I suggest?
Wow, seasons beatings. I like it. I will be stealing that based on how this afternoon goes today on the Illegal Curve postgame show coming your way probably around 3:45. Before we even get started on the previewing the Jets Wild House, a little news out of Morning Skate, not Morning Skate, but before Morning Skate, courtesy of John Liu. Jim, I don't know if you saw this, but I was, of course, we're here chatting, so we weren't necessarily paying attention to Twitter. But during the commercial break, I took a little gander, and sure enough, who is in a non-contact jersey? Kyle Connor, back in Winnipeg and skating just 20 days after suffering that injury. So what are your initial thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, listen, it was the first thing I saw on my timeline when I got my life together this morning. And that was some great news. I mean, I just looked at the video. I'm looking at it right now, folks. If you haven't seen it, go to John Liu, TSN WPG. And I mean, listen, that's just great news for the Winnipeg Jets. I jokingly thought to myself, Yeah, well, if I was watching Velarde, Ehlers, and Scheifele do what they're doing right now at that top line, I'd be trying to get back right away as well. And listen, I mean, Kyle Connor is such a dynamic player, and tell you what, I mean, I'm sure the power play could use him right now, and I'm sure that's something you guys have sort of chopped up and sort of the one kink in the armor right now for the Winnipeg Jets, the way they're playing. But listen, if Kyle Connor can come back at any point in January, to me, it's a huge win. I mean, I had thought that, once we got the sort of 6 to 8 week timeline and looked at the schedule, I was sort of expecting that, ideally KFC would be ready to go after the player break in the All-Star game. And if he's out there right now, we're not even into January yet, I think we can realistically think that there might be a possibility of him playing potentially on the next homestand when the team comes back at some point, as they're there for about a week and a half and 4 home games. I mean, they're not going to rush him, but he wouldn't be on the ice right now if he wasn't able to skate even in the non-contact jersey. So I don't know how that's anything but good news for the Winnipeg Jets right now.
Yeah, and just to follow up on Huss's thoughts there, that the team is not needing him, right? Like they obviously are going to welcome him back with open arms and probably put him right back on that top line. But this team is getting points. This team is racking up wins, and so it's not like he's out there to go, okay, we've lost 4 in a row, and let's see if we can speed this up a bit. I just watched it while you were talking there, Hustler, and he's like not just – a lot of times these guys come back on the ice and go up and down the ice like a Sunday skate at the local arena with your family. He's turning, he's pivoting. He's not going hard, don't get me wrong, but as Andrew said, check out John Liu's Twitter, as Dave said too, and just get a look at it. But that could be your biggest trade deadline acquisition, and if he could come back. I agree with Andrew, Dave. I don't know how you feel about it, but if he's out there now, from when they start, I think it's 2 to 3 weeks, and they'll probably be on the safe side in 3 weeks, but if they can get him back 3rd week of January, that really speaks to how good this lineup could be once again. I've been on it since they drafted him. I think he's going to be the Jets' first 50-goal scorer, and you mentioned Dave, he was on pace for over 60. I thought it was going to happen this year. But if they can add him into this lineup, and then, whenever these guys get back on the ice, guys, then the debate starts, right? Like, it's the same with Heinolas, who comes out, and where do they go? And that's what happened with Velarde when he came back. Where do you play him?
Well, I'll be honest. I had said on WST the last couple of days that there was a moratorium for the remainder of December, for the remainder of 2023, on talking about where Connor plays when he comes back, as well as Ville Heinola, because that will be happening in January. Although I didn't expect to see Kyle Connor skating this morning right now. So, listen, in these next couple of weeks, that conversation is going to happen. And, I mean, listen, you could obviously go back to where he was and move Velarde. I would be tempted to see if Kyle Connor might be able to skate with Cole Perfetti and get a bit more of a jump and a bit more offense out of that line right now. And it would be a way of sort of easing him back in with maybe a few less minutes. You're going to want to have Kyle Connor out there on a regular basis. And I don't think – I mean, that line right now realistically is probably technically the 3rd line if you look at ice time distribution from the coaches. Yeah. I mean, the Lowry line gets so many of the big matchups and plays in so many situations that cranks their ice time up. Logic probably says he's back on the top line at one point, and maybe that allows Nikolai Ehlers to come back and play with Cole Perfetti. I mean, I still really like that group, but I don't know. The way Velarde, Ehlers, and Scheifele are playing right now, that's a pretty tough ask to do anything other than keep those guys together. But Dave, hey, listen, good problems to have, getting a guy like Connor back when your team's rolling the way the team has been while he's been out.
And I don't want to jinx it, but a lot of times these problems figure themselves out, like over the next 3 weeks. It would be amazing if that line can continue this production consistently for the next 3 to 4 weeks.
Yeah.
The likelihood of that isn't probably the fact. So then you make those decisions then. Like a week before he comes back, you might be going, well, that line hasn't produced in 3 games, so here we go. But those things work itself out. But yeah, I mean, I'm just as shocked as everybody else that he's out there skating this morning.
Well, I mean, think about it. The conversation we had like half an hour ago was like, okay, well, he's coming back in early February. And like Hustler said, we don't know when he's coming back. I'm sure that'll be a question. Well, actually, I was going to say it'd be a question to Rick Bowness. Problem is Rick Bowness won't be speaking before the game. He'll speak, of course, after the game. So we'll we'll all be listening to what's going on at the Matt Frost Media Center. You can, of course, watch that. That'll be on our YouTube channel as soon as it's available, recorded by one of our photogs. Colby Spence will be taking photos today for us. So it'll be Colby who will have that. But yeah, I mean, look, it's going to be a really interesting conversation. And like Huss said, I guess the moratorium on WST might be coming off because we were not anticipating a December skate, but it's good news for the Jets club.
We made it. We made it. The moratorium did make it to the end of yesterday's show. Now, John Lewin put this out yesterday morning. May have been dragged into it, but I think come when we're back on the air with the regularly scheduled shows on Tuesday, this is probably going to be a topic that we'll hit in addition to the big home and home against the rival Minnesota Wild.
Well, I mean, let's get into that, of course, because, you know, like I said, we'll have more information on the post-game show that's coming your way around 3:45 whenever the Jets and Wild finish their game. But Huss, I mean, it's going to sound obvious, but how critical is this series? You know, Minnesota, Jim and I have been talking about it, one of the hottest teams in the NHL, especially specifically since they've made their coaching change. They're playing a hard brand of hockey. I watched that. Jim and I both watched a bit of that Bruins Wild game last Tuesday, or 2 Tuesdays ago, and that was a real good game. These guys are playing an effective brand of hockey. The one thing that's not working for them, which might be good for the Jets, if they can get their power play going, is the PK hasn't been very good for Minnesota. But what are you seeing from this home and home series coming up?
Well, I mean, obviously it's crucial. Anytime you're going back-to-back against a division rival, it's big. I'd suggest it's bigger for the Wild, who are 8 points back of the Jets, than it is for the Jets. But it is an opportunity for Winnipeg to really sort of step on the throat. I mean, if a sweep by either team is a massive swing in the standings. A sweep by Winnipeg essentially, you know, takes a lot of the steam out of what Minnesota's done over the month of December heading into the new year and would put them up 12 points. A Wild sweep on the other side would almost completely erase their miserable start and put them within 4 points of the top three, and jumping a few teams along the way right in that big mix. It's amazing right now that both wildcard teams and then some are from the Central Division as opposed to the Pacific, the way I think most of us thought that this was going to play out going in. But listen, I mean, it goes to say 2 head-to-head games against a team in your division is big. But to me, these games are a little bit more. You know, we've heard all season long the mantra of the family that the Winnipeg Jets are. You come at one of us, you come at all of us. And listen, they've passed pretty much every test so far this season overall. This series promises to have more physicality, I think, than we've seen in most of these games before. And I think that'll be a challenge that the Winnipeg Jets will look to rise to. But I am fascinated to see how much the BS that happened at the end of last year carries over into this game. And in particular, how the Winnipeg Jets handle it. If the roles were reversed, I can tell you right now, the Wild would be running around like a bunch of idiots taking runs at guys. We've seen that before. That's not normally what the Winnipeg Jets do. But I don't know about you guys. I don't think that all of that business with Ryan Hartman knocking Nikolai Ehlers out at the end of the season is forgotten. And this goes back to my point earlier. I don't think this is going to be another one of these lazy 1 p.m. starts. So, you know, how the Jets sort of respond to that with the goal, first and foremost, of winning the hockey game is going to be really interesting when the puck drops. And, I mean, again, they're going back-to-back. So what happens today, how much of that carries over into New Year's Eve in the Twin Cities as well?
I think it happens real quick. I think it's either Brendan Dillon or Adam Lowry, and I'll be glued to Kelly Moore and the 680 CJV pregame show to find out what the starting lineups are, because the minute I hear that, I expect Brendan Dillon or Adam Lowry to be one of the guys in the lineup. Now, Hartman might not be starting, but I agree with you. I really like Rick Bowness's system, and I don't like to be an ageist at all. I think that he is in tune with today's game. I think he is a very smart coach, but he's also got that, we see him on the bench, right? Like some of the best B-roll footage is when there's a wrong call, there's a liberty taken. Rick is that guy at the bar who said, "Who shoved my buddy?" And he wants to get in there. And I think that it doesn't take long. And I don't think Rick is coaching it. I don't think it's going to be mentioned. I think it's just going to happen that Brendan Dillon or Adam Lowry ask Mr. Hartman to dance. And if Mr. Hartman doesn't want to dance, then I think the game is going to be closely monitored, right? But I I don't know Ryan Hartman personally at all or very well, but I would think that he will oblige. They'll get it out of the way, and then we'll play some hockey. But because it's going to happen, I believe, real quick, I agree with a Hustler here. I think that this 2-game set, home and home, and don't kid yourselves, like the entire state of Minnesota is going to be watching this game and then heading to the game tomorrow and wanting whatever comes out of this. So I think it happens real quick, and then I think they get back to hockey, but that hockey is going to be physical and hard, and you're going to know you played a couple hockey games come Monday.
Well, and Dave, I mean, to Jim's point about Rick Bowness being a little old school, and sometimes you get some great B-roll of it. Maybe the best of the B-roll all season long was from that game at the end of the season when he decided it would be a good idea to throw Ryan Reeves out there with 30 seconds left in the game. Yeah. Bones was literally threatening to kill Evason on the side, and that is the one thing that this matchup today is missing. It's Dean Evason on the other side of the bench. Now, the coaching changes worked very well for Minnesota. We were going through this yesterday, talking to Jesse Pierce on the show. They're 11-3 under John Hines.
Yeah.
I mean, I think they bottomed out. They realized that their season was on the line, and they've essentially been playing almost a playoff brand of hockey for the last month plus right now. But the Jets have been doing that all season long, and they would love nothing more than to stop the Wild in their tracks. And as you mentioned, that PK number that is not working for Minnesota maybe gives Jet fans a little hope that we might be able to hear a goal song or two after a 5-on-4 power play, because as well as the team is playing at 5-on-5, it is somewhat confounding that they just have not had success and really any momentum right now with the power play. And that is one New Year's resolution that I'm sure the entire Winnipeg Jets have to get better going into the new year, and no time like the present to get it going with these final 2 games of 2023.
Yeah, no, you're right, Hassan. And it's interesting because Jim and I talked about it with, we read Murat's article in The Athletic talking about the power play. And one of the things that stood out, just you didn't have to read the article, you could watch it and see that the lack of movement from this group is interesting. How they're married to the positions that they seem to, all have, and then they don't move when the puck is being distributed at all. So we'll see if, that's one of the things they worked on yesterday, but it's critical. I mean, your 5-on-5 play has been exemplary, and now it's a function of getting your special teams working, because, having the 23rd and 26th ranked power play and PKs respectively is just not going to be sufficient. You need to be, you don't need to be top 10, but you were at one point last year. You were top 10 in the PK, and you're top 15 in the power play. And that's what you need to be. You look, folks are comparing this team to from last year's team, even because, if you look at them from a points perspective, they're very similar. But the difference is last year you won basically largely because of Connor Hellebuck, and you outscored your problems. This year, your 5-on-5 play has been fantastic. The play of your goaltending, so your goaltenders overall has been fantastic. And now it's just your special teams. And once the Jets can kind of get that demon fixed, it really will be, it'll serve them, because we talked about it. Rick Bowness said yesterday, 5 or 6 games have been lost because of an inability to produce on the power play. Well, that's significant, because right now, as you just touched on, and it's one of the things that is worth mentioning, you've got Minnesota, they're charging, but it's hard. The one thing that you got to focus on is it's a long season, and it's hard to play playoff hockey the entirety of the season. It really is. It drains your team. So it'll be interesting to see if they can keep that up. I don't think it's sustainable, but we'll see. But the other thing that's worth mentioning is Arizona and Nashville. They're not going anywhere. They're still sticking around. You talked about that tough Central Division us. It's going to be really interesting, and that's why if you're the Jets and you have 6 more points or even 4 more points, you got a lot more breathing room than you do right now. So yeah, you're in a good position, but there's still a lot of good that you can gain if you can start getting those special teams under control.
Yeah, listen, if the Jets had an average power play this year, we're probably talking about a team going into 2023 with a 3-4 point cushion right now in that first place. I mean, listen, obviously nothing is going to be perfect throughout the entire year. And if anything, I mean, to me, the foundation of the Winnipeg Jets, the way they're playing at 5-on-5, and have done pretty much consistently since the start of the season, I mean, that tells you all you need to know about how this team can compete night in and night out, and why I don't think we'll see anything resembling the bottoming out for a couple months like happened to last year's team, and it happened in the past. I mean, I think they are built with the foundation of 5-on-5 play that'll have them competitive in all of these games. But if you can start getting a little bit more, and we know the talent is there. I mean, there's no reason why this team, with the players they're throwing out there, can't be more effective on the power play. And I think, if anything, that shows that the Winnipeg Jets have another gear that they can show if they continue to focus on what they've been doing well, add a little bit more with some dynamic players and some changes in on the power play. And, at that point, we're going to be talking about a stretch drive, that includes scoreboard watching with Dallas and Colorado, as opposed to Minnesota and Arizona and all that. But I say that with the caveat that a big part of that is taking care of business this week and not allowing the Minnesota Wild to enter the chat for the top three teams in the division, and have them battling with Arizona and Nashville and St. Louis and the Edmonton Oilers and the Flames and the Kraken for those wild card spots right now. Because I think based on the way that these teams have played so far this year, it would be a surprise if the top three in the Central is not Dallas, Winnipeg, Colorado, right. And by the same token in the Pacific, if it's not Vancouver, Vegas, Los Angeles. And that means you've got a bunch of teams right clumped together that are all battling, with every point being crucial to be one of those two wild card spots at the end of the year.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that's why it's an interesting weekend, right? Like, there's the fallout of the Yo's hit from last year. And Dave mentioned it earlier that this could be a 10-point cushion if they could get all 4 points. But really, I look towards the top. It's hard not to look back. I love Hustler referenced once that things in your rearview mirror appear closer than they are last year, when the Jets started to struggle and things started catching up on them real quick. I thought that was a great line. But I look forward. Like, you've got 3 games in hand here with Colorado, and these aren't going to be easy games with Minnesota. They're rolling, of course, 4 wins in a row, 7-3 in their last 10. But if you can get 4 points, even 3 points this weekend, and keep climbing towards Colorado with 3 games in hand on them, I would imagine they play this weekend, and so maybe 2 games in hand and get 4 points here. It's all about continuing to grow and go forward, right? But the power play, pardon me, is crucial. They once they get that going, and if they can improve the penalty kill, Hustler's right, Dave, you mentioned this earlier too, like, it just has to be average. And they would probably have 3 or 4 more wins this year, and they would be 3 games in hand on Colorado and probably a point to 3 games up in the division. So nothing's going to be perfect, as Hustler said, but it can't be this bad for the entire season. I expect it to come around, and hopefully this weekend against a bad penalty kill with the Minnesota Wild.
Well, and so, Huss, I'm going to ask you to put on I asked Jimmy to do this earlier. I want you to put on your GM hat. And if you are GM Kevin Cheveldayoff and you're looking at this Jets roster right now, and of course,
blow it up.
Blow it up. There you go. Headline: GM Kevin Cheveldayoff.
I think I heard that over the summer. Somebody said blow it up.
Yeah,
a couple of people actually.
Lots of people. But, you've got Ville Heinola. You've got that question mark as to what you're going to do. You've got the glut of blue liners in Chisholm and Stanley, and you're not really sure where they all stand. So, if you're the GM, though, what are you looking to shore up? I mean, we saw Chris Johnson mention Sean Monahan to come in and play, for the Jets potentially. Well, be acquired by the Jets, I should say, as that opportunity. But what would you do if you're the GM to shore this team up to make them a deep team when it comes time for the playoffs?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, I will say I think this is as deep a team as the Jets have had, probably since 2011. I mean, you could argue that the 17-18 team, when they made the addition of Stastny and you had Brian Little playing on the 4th line, was probably the best version of it. And maybe that team, I guess, in the top 12 was deeper. But, Winnipeg now has guys. I mean, with Kapari coming back, I mean, they'll have an extra skater that, is definitely capable of being in the lineup. I think Axel has completely established himself as an NHLer, not a guy that's just up on a loan from the Manitoba Moose. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, listen, when you look at this team, it's certainly not in net. I think there's an argument, because the defense has played so well this year, like that I think is what we all thought that would be the real, hot point for Kevin Cheveldayoff. How can they get this, defense core up to the level that they need? Well, they've been that and more throughout the season. I mean, if you look at the defensive metrics, I mean, the Morrissey-DeMello line pairing is right up there, like number 1, I think, in goal differential for pairs over 300 minutes. Well, Pionk and Dylan are 7th in the league as well. And it's been well documented that Dylan Sandberg and Nate Schmidt just don't get scored on when they are out there right now. So I think the urgency on the blue line is not maybe what we all thought that it would be at the beginning of the season. Now, listen, if you can get a borderline elite top 4 right shot defenseman, I mean, you do that. That would absolutely be, I think, on the wish list. But put it this way, I'm not sure it is as high of a priority as it might have been because of the way these guys, and especially Neil Pionk, has played. I mean, he was a guy that had a rough couple seasons, but we had seen him play at a higher level in the past, and he has done that so far. Is that going to be sustained through the rest of the season? I guess we'll find out, and decisions will be made based on that. If you had asked me this question 2 weeks ago, that is where I would have started on the blue line. Mm-hmm. But as we go into 2024 right now, I think I sort of lean more along the line of a second line center that could come in and add a real boost to that line and potentially play with Perfetti and either Ehlers or Connor or Velarde, whoever that is. And if you had that player, the Lowry line's not changing. All of a sudden, your fourth line has Vlad Nemetsnikov, has Alex Iafallo on it. And if that is the case, then you're talking about a team that is really deep from 1 to 12. Not that the guys haven't been getting it done so far, but also allows you the cushion that when inevitably a guy or two gets hurt, players like Axel and Gus are able to come in and continue to do what they've done all year right now. So long way of saying I think the second line center has become the priority. That wasn't the way things were at the start of the year. But I think they'll kick tires and look around a way to, get a difference maker on the blue line at some point if the price is right. But I have a feeling that one more spot in the top 6 at a reasonable cost will be what the team's looking for. And I know Elias Lindholm's been a guy that his name has been kicked around. I think he'd be a perfect fit for that and doesn't have a contract next year. So it's not like you're getting into, it wouldn't come with an extension. But again, do the Jets want to pay a big rental price? I think the way the team plays over the next couple months will be a big determining factor in just how aggressive Kevin Cheveldayoff wants to be and feels that he should be based on where the team is at right now. But they've certainly done the job so far up until this point, Dave.
There you go. Well, there we go. We've got the words from the man, the myth, the legend. He is Andrew Hustler Patterson. You hear him every day during the week on Winnipeg Sports Talk, coming your way 1 o'clock Central Time, Huss. 1 o'clock Central.
Yeah,
Winnipeg
just
Sports
like
Talk.
the games this weekend. That's when we're live. And you can just, much like I'm sure many of you are listening to the Illegal Curve podcast, just put in Winnipeg Sports Talk wherever you get your pods. And we usually got it up around 3:30, just in time for your drive home when we used to do the program back on a station that will not be named, Dave.
It's always fun to talk about the old times. But the new times are a lot more fun. We're having a lot more fun. And hey, you know what the benefit of the new times are, Huss? We get to have Jim on the show. We get to have, one day we had Sean Reynolds and Craig Button. We had TSN and Sportsnet on our show. So
Rumble.
It's nice for us because it gives us a lot more variety. We get a lot of chance to speak to our friends throughout the media landscape, and we're not limited in scope.
Well, listen, man, you guys have had another great year and continue to kill it doing both the shows on Saturdays as well as all the post games. And it's always a great opportunity to talk to Jim live, even if he's using a baked potato for a microphone like he is today. But I'm going to get you
I hear
2024.
I heard the audio issues. I saw it all day, and I will work on rectifying it. The problem is I fire this thing up at home once every 4 months, so if that. So I'll power it up or change the audio. I apologize to all the viewers and listeners. It's nice to talk to Andrew on a Saturday morning before noon too, so it's all good, Dave.
Listen, I would have preferred a later slot, but I realize this show's 9 to 11. So
yeah, hey, we gave you the late slot too, Huss. I mean, usually the Jets slot is at 9:30, but I gave you the 10:30 today, so I tried to extend it a little bit.
I do appreciate that. It was a great day to do it because we're right downtown just after this to get ready for this game, and as I say, I'm looking forward to seeing what this crowd's like, and I'm just hoping that Jet fans remember how this season ended, because we all remember the way the Minnesota Wild treated the Winnipeg Jets and their fans after the Stanley Kaprizov incident. I mean, it was less than hospitable. So I know there'll be a lot of families and kids coming up around this holidays today, but I'm hoping that the rivalry really kind of fires this crowd up today, and we have a good one tonight. And then of course tomorrow afternoon, heading into, I know there's a lot of Winnipeggers actually heading down tomorrow or right after the game. Go to the Wild Jets at 1 and then Packers Vikings at 7:20. Hell of a way to finish up.
Wow. Yeah, that's a good weekend.
Head into the new year. But anyways, thanks again for having me, Dave. All the best to you. I mean, you're saving the best content for last of 2023. No Ezzy, no Drew. Bring in the boys. No, seriously, love the boys, and you guys have killed it all year long, and I'm looking forward to more chats coming up in 2024.
Sounds great, Huss. We appreciate you joining us this morning here on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Happy New Year to you. I'm not going to say Happy New Year to our audience yet, Huss, because they'll hopefully be joining us on the post.
2 days.
Yeah, exactly. Tonight and tomorrow. So you'll get a chance to wish you all Happy New Year. Plus, hopefully most of you will join. I know there's already 7,000 expected to be at the Moose game tomorrow afternoon. Live fireworks after the game, Huss. We're excited to see Archangel inside Canada Life with some explosions after the game. So hopefully the Moose give the fans something to explode on the ice for, and then the fireworks after it. So anyways, we'll get into that. Happy New Year, Huss. Thanks a lot for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Hey, my pleasure, guys. Have a great one, and Happy New Year to you and everybody in the chat.
See ya, Huss.
That's Andrew Hustler Patterson of Winnipeg Sports Talk. Well, Jim, you soldiered through it. Whether it was an audio issue or whether it was health issues, you soldiered through 2 hours of the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. So we very much appreciate your effort for us today, and we very much appreciate the effort of our sponsors. So I'll give them a big thanks, because a big thanks to all of the sponsors of Illegal Curve who make the postgame show, the Saturday show, and the website a possibility. They are Rumors Restaurant and Comedy Club, Linden Market Dental Center, Zappia Group Realty, Betway, Tough Tuck, Boston Pizza, Seagram's, Rolly's Transfer, and Farmery Beer, home, Jim, of the IC beer, which I'm going to try and get you after your big appearance today.
Wow.
These fine businesses because of their continued support of Illegal Curve Hockey. So, well, it's been a fun morning, Jim. We've flown through 2 hours of Jets and Moose talk for the folks this Saturday morning, setting up the Jets and Wild this afternoon. They'll be joining us after on the Illegal Curve Hockey, the Illegal Curve postgame show. But I'll give you the final word, and then we'll send it to Canada Life.
Yeah, well, I just wish everybody a Happy New Year. Just to echo on Hustler, I think you and Drew and as you do a great job. It's always a pleasure having coming on the show, and I always watch when I'm not too. So Happy New Year to you three. Happy New Year to everybody in the chat. And I will get the audio fixed. I apologize. And hopefully my NyQuil coma didn't affect my takes too much. That's probably why they were decent today, actually. So, but just a general happy, safe New Year to everybody. And enjoy the game. No better way to go into the New Year than back-to-back against Minnesota. So great stuff. And have a happy, safe New Year, everybody, and especially you, Dave.
All right, appreciate that, Jim. Happy New Year to you and yours, and we'll see everyone back for the Illegal Curve postgame show, which will be around 3:45 p.m. after Jets and Wild, which gets underway at 1 o'clock. Thanks a lot for listening and for joining us this morning. We will be back very soon. This has been the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. I'm Dave Minuk. He's Jim Toth. Enjoy the rest of your morning. We'll see you later this afternoon for the Illegal Curve postgame show.
Thanks for listening to this broadcast from Illegal Curve Hockey. For more great Illegal Curve content, subscribe to the Illegal Curve YouTube channel, follow @Illegal Curve on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and visit your online home for hockey in Winnipeg, illegalcurve.com.